Hey guys, welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are actually taking a look at Alone in the Dark, Jack is Back for the PlayStation 1. This game was actually released in 1995. This was roughly around the early days of the PlayStation. This is also a sequel to the original Alone in the Dark that was released on the PC way back in 1993, and these games are considered to be the first mainstream survival horror games to actually ever be created. You can clearly see by the look and aesthetic of these games, if you're familiar with them, you can see the likes of the further like Resident Evil franchise and other survival horror games where they got their influences from, because they all use the likes of 3D characters but in photo rendered backgrounds or pre-rendered backgrounds as they're more well known. This version of the game went on to spawn a couple of sequels and later then reboots of the franchise later on. But this main title here, the sequel, Jack is Back, it also was given different names in depending on whichever region it was actually released. But when it was released for the likes of the PS1, it was released on the PC, and it was also released on the Sega Saturn at the time as well. So this here again is another type of survival horror game. And as you can see from the style of the graphics, it is very similar to like an early kind of Resident Evil style game. Again, these here games were the first to pretty much start that kind of vibe and create that genre, but it was Resident Evil that really kind of established it as the survival horror genre, because it took everything that literally was it that they got inspired by the Alone in the Dark series, as you can see here, and they ramped it up to a whole new level. Now, I haven't played this now. I actually got my hands on this actually a number of years ago. I'd always seen it and I was always interested to kind of play these older style of games, and for me personally, I wanted to see the inspiration behind of the likes of Resident Evil, because as you all know, I do mention Resident Evil a lot on this channel because it is my all-time favourite franchise, but Resident Evil 1 is my favourite game of all time. So for me, it was interesting to do kind of like into a check to see the background of the inspiration behind those games and where they got their ideas from, and instantly when you actually play this game you can clearly see where they got the ideas from. Now, even though this is an earlier title, it is a sequel. Now it is more advanced and better put together than the original game, again because due to hardware limitations and software limitations back in those days of early computing and PC and so forth. So it definitely is an advancement. But you definitely know by playing it, it definitely is an earlier type of title, because as you know yourself, like in modern day games that use the likes of these style of backgrounds, maybe not so much this style, but definitely the controls associated with it, the tank controls, are heavily hated on, and you'd always assume that it was the Resident Evil titles and titles that followed it that caused that. Yeah, some of them were good, some of them not so good. But it's not until you play titles like this here. It is actually a really good game, don't get me wrong, but you can clearly see why the tank controls are hated on so much, because especially in this game here, even though it tries to execute everything really well, visually it's actually really, really good. I love the visual style of the game, but the controls are very, very fiddly. They're very, very clunky, and especially if you were playing it with an old PlayStation controller, it left a lot to be kind of questioned, because it was a struggle to actually play. The one consolation that the game actually had, because it was an extremely difficult game, I remember actually playing it and I don't know how many times, you'd die a million times on one spot just to get past it, but you had access to a quick save feature, which to be honest was a godsend, and it was kind of reflective of older games that used to be on the PC back at that time. We used to have a quick save feature. It was very much needed because the game was very, very clunky, and 9 times out of 10 you would find that you literally would end up having to retry the same part over and over and over and over and over again just to get past it even once, so that you could progress further on. And it could lead to a lot of frustration, even though this is meant to be a survival horror game, but because of its clunkiness it can actually lead to more frustration. So what actually happens is you don't feel that sense of horror sometimes in it, because you're dying so much. But if you stick with it, there is actually a decent game here that has kind of like a half decent kind of story, even though there's not much terms of voice acting in it. but there's really nice environments, there's really a lovely visual aesthetic to the game. It's almost kind of like cartoony, if you will. It's not like as realistic or photographic or photogenic as say the Resident Evil games, but it has its own unique appeal, and you can clearly see the ideas that were behind it. But again, this is an earlier title in that kind of genre. This is one of the earliest titles, and it is unique in its own way. If you can bear with it and enjoy kind of the game for what it is actually a decent enough title. Again, it's just the clunky controls and the slowness can actually get you down when you're playing it. But again, going back to the visual style of the game, I actually love the whole visual aesthetic of it. Oh, the graphics, even though they're pre-rendered, they look like as if they're pixel art style graphics, but a lot of it even looks like as if it was hand drawn. And for me, that's what actually looks incredible, because I love like kind of like anything that looks good art wise. I just think it's definitely worth investing in, and I just love that style. And I think it just actually comes together as a nice package, regardless of the likes of the playability factor of it. For an old game, it actually does look really, really good. Now this game here, now to actually get your hands on it nowadays, if you're going on the likes of auction sites, the likes of eBay and stuff, regardless of the version that you get, they're going for actually pretty much big money now. If you're getting the Sega Saturn, the PS1, even if you can get your hands on an original PC copy, if you can get a physical copy, you'll be guaranteed you'll be paying big money for it, because the games like these here, because they're becoming a lot harder to find, are demanding a higher price now. So it is leaving a lot of people now are willing to have to pay big bucks in order to get their hands on something like this. But it is worthwhile actually looking into if you are like a game collector, because it is actually like a classic title, even though like I said it is frustrating, it has its moments, but it's, if you can look past that, there is actually the premise of a half decent game here. It is frustrating. It's just the clunkiness of the controls, that's what usually gets the better of you. But I know myself, when I was playing this back in the day, I'll be honest, I just refused to kind of let a game beat me. Now I can't say the same for that now. I wouldn't have as much patience now as I used to have when I was younger. But definitely I remember when I did get this game, because I was so intrigued by it and I wanted to see all the differences and stuff behind what made the game what it was and why it was such an inspiration to Resident Evil. I still stuck with it, and I played it and I played it and I played it, even through all the frustrating moments and having to restart sections again, or even restarting the whole game again because I messed up on a save. That's another point. If you have the quick save, but if you accidentally overwrite one of your saves, you can screw up your whole progress if something goes wrong, if you end up getting killed or something happens. So it can leave you then having to restart the whole game again. So you just have to be careful of that if you are going to attempt to play it. But I eventually did get through the game, and I did eventually finish it. Now I'll be honest, I was glad to finish it, but at the same time, parts of it I definitely enjoyed it. But it's just the frustration of actually not knowing of how many attempts you were going to take to get past a certain part. But then again, I suppose that was kind of reflective of games of that time period, because there was zero room or tolerance for error. If you weren't on track of everything or on the ball, you were crucified. You would definitely pay a hefty price and you'd die a million times over on it. So it was quite crazy. But again, like with practice, that was the one thing about games like this here, is they definitely tested your patience. But not only that, I find as well with games like this here, you actually became a far better gamer as a result of it, because you learn to develop a lot of patience, because a lot of people wouldn't actually let games like this beat them. And if you were able to look past that, you actually had the premise of a half decent game here. Now it's flawed, it's not the best in terms of certain things like the controls and so forth, like I mentioned, but there is a lot of cool features. And again, I love the visual style of the graphics, like it's kind of got like a hand-drawn kind of effect to it, which I think is quite beautiful. But it has its quirks, even though it has its cons as well. But it's a decent enough title, and it is kind of reflective of the time period as well. And if you're into your older style of games, I would definitely recommend that you give it a go, as long as you're willing to kind of give yourself a bit of time to actually overcome some of the frustrations, because you will be left frustrated playing this game sometimes, especially with the controls and that. But if you overcome it, you will actually have a decent experience. It is actually a classic title, and even just to experience it, even just the once, it is worthwhile actually doing so. And I highly recommend if you can get yourself a copy of it, or get to play it in any shape or form, just to experience it, even just to kind of see, like I mentioned earlier on the video, just to see the kind of the ideas behind what may have inspired the Resident Evil series as well, and you can clearly see why from looking at it, from the pre-rendered backgrounds to the fixed camera angles, being able to move in from one shot to another and the camera changes. For me personally, these are my favourite style of games. I absolutely love them, so it's always cool to go back and play them every so often, even though I know I'm not as good at them now as I used to be, but they're still worth actually playing. So I highly recommend you do give it a go if you get the chance. So I'd love to know your thoughts on Alone in the Dark Jack is Back for the PlayStation 1. Did you play it back in the day, and if so, did you find it as frustrating, but did you manage to finish it also? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. So if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be updated whenever I release future content. And also feel free to share the video, as I will be exploring a lot of these old classics from back in the day. So as always, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.